Hi class. I am going to do a short little video on a few terms from Bully Society. So this week you have reading continuing in Chapter 3, Culture, and then you have the introduction to Bully Society, and then you have section 4.3 in Chapter 4. So I can talk about that section 4.3 in chapter 4 a little bit as well in a separate video, but for now I'm going to talk about a couple of terms from Bully Society. And as you hopefully recall, Bully Society is our supplemental reading along with the main textbook. And Jessie Klein wrote this book when she became interested in what were some of the motivating factors related to school shootings. And she had been a counselor working in schools, social worker, so working in a couple of different capacities, and so that kind of led her interest to seeking out information on school shootings. She conducted numerous interviews. She researched articles that had been written on the topic, on the topic, and then arrived at the underlying theme, which was bullying. And bullying was connecting all of the school shootings that she researched. Many of those who were shooters had been bullied in school, which led them to feel the need to take revenge in a violent way. And this is something that is taking revenge in this, for one, taking revenge, period, and then taking revenge in this way comes out of culture, comes out of cultural context. For one, we have, the whole theme of vengeful actions is a popular theme in American film. So it's not something that's unheard of. So if someone feels that they've been wronged by someone else, then it may lead them to seek revenge in some kind of way. Often we see men in those films taking revenge in a violent way. So it is assaulting someone, it's destroying property, it's killing someone even. So then it's not unusual then that we would see some young men who were bullied in school feel like, for one, they should take revenge instead of just ignoring it, going on about their way. They seek to take revenge, and some of them seek to take revenge, and some of them do that in a quite violent way. So this is where we come to these terms that Jessie Klein is offering to us. They come out of the research that she did and the themes that she uncovered in her research. So let's look at a couple of them. So at the top of the list we have gender policing. Gender is a socio-cultural mechanism, and it is the way that we define the appropriate social roles for males and females. Once we identify those, we call that gender. So gender is something that is confirmed, it's created, confirmed, reaffirmed, reinforced within our society, within our culture. So it's not just coming from mass media, it's not just coming from maybe religion, religious beliefs, it's coming from our family members, it's coming from our peers, it's coming from the toys that we play with, which would be also kind of come under the mass media component as well as economy. So it's reinforced in a number of ways. So so that is gender, and gender policing is the act of keeping people abiding by their gender norms. So those who are cisgendered are people who conform to society's expectations of what a male should be and what a female should be. If there's very much variation from that, then those individuals can be somewhere on the continuum between masculinity and femininity. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're transgender or taking on the gender characteristics of the opposite sex, but it may mean that they're just somewhere on that continuum. So for instance, it's permissible in our society for females to wear pants. So females don't always have to wear dresses. Females can wear their hair short, for instance. Males can wear flowered shirts if they're like a Hawaiian style shirt, so they can wear flowers. But again, our culture defines a certain context in which they can do that. And if they go further along the continuum, if those males go further along the continuum and want to wear a flowered dress, for instance, then they may be labeled as being transgender, or they may be labeled as, even though there's no connection here, but they may be labeled as being gay, for instance. But the point is that they have moved away from the expectations of society. They've moved away from their gender role as it is defined by society. Gender policing is keeping them abiding by those norms. So it could be making fun of someone for not, for making fun of a male who's wearing flowers. It could be making fun of a male who's wearing pink, or who decides he wants to play the flute in band instead of play the drums. So it could be a number of things, and it can come from peers, it can come from our siblings, which is a subset of peers. It can come from our parents. It can come from a number of different sources, even in the mass media. So just looking at images in the mass media, and if those images tend to reflect just the traditional gender norms, that is a form of gender policing. Because if we view these images, we see them as normal, then there is a pressure there to be like those images, to conform to those images, and others are seeing that too. So others who participate in bullying or gender policing, then they are being reinforced by those images in mass media as well. Their actions are being reinforced by those mass media messages. So Jesse Klein argues that when the shooters, prior to becoming shooters, these young men were maybe harassed for not being masculine enough, not being tough enough, then that was gender policing, and that was a contributor to school shootings. And you all, I think, know what gender policing probably looks like. If you look at toys, for instance, that are geared towards males and towards females, then that is a part of gender policing. So, I just did a search for, and come up with some wacky things, but I just did a search for toys for boys and girls. Even saying, boys and girls, and always putting children into those categories, those sex categories, reinforces the notion that that they're separate, and they should be kept separate, and they have more differences than what they have in common. In school, it's common for teachers to, place us into groups based upon our sex. A group for girls and a group for boys. And then we see toys geared in that way. So there is, for instance, this website, Cool Toys for Kids, and they have it divided up into toys for boys and then toys for girls. So a lot of the toys for boys involve like flying objects, like this quadcopter, and involve building things, for instance. They involve, not that, they involve weapons, and then, or weapons as in like toy weapons, for example. So it's a Nerf toy, but I mean, look at the expression on this guy's face. He doesn't look like he's playing. He looks like he's quite serious. And in the era of school shootings and just mass shootings, period, a vigilant society, I personally think, would scale back on toys such as these, and even ads such as this, that make it that seem like it's glorified. It's, you know, there's a glorification of violence. So that's a little disturbing. Okay, construction. So these are geared towards boys. And then down for girls, so their best educational toys, so forth. And somewhere down here, there is a list of, oh, here, so cool toys for girls. So here is so this is medical. This is maybe a little bit different, a checkup center, although the colors are, you know, kind of girl colors, a lighter blue, lavender, flowers and hearts, so that's common. Espresso kitchen, you know, it's basically reinforcing the notion that girls should cook. So that's even a relative or a friend that buys a toy for a child that is for a girl that's a kitchen set, that's a form of gender policing. So there are different ways, again, that gender policing can take place. Another term that Jesse Klein talks about is masculinity imperatives. And think about what imperative means. Imperative means that it's something that's critical, it's crucial, it's something that must be done. And she's saying this is what she's observed, is that it's absolutely imperative that males take on masculine characteristics in order to survive in school. They need to embody these images of masculinity to avoid being bullying. And some boys may even, and it's not just boys that bully, but some boys may even bully because they're trying to avoid being bullied. So even the bullier is not just you know, this nemesis, you know, this not just antagonist. The bullier can be someone who is trying to survive within the system as well. So again, masculinity imperatives is the idea that it's critical, it's crucial for boys to take on these masculine characteristics. And then a way of adapting to this imperative is by engaging in hypermasculinity. And that is an extreme form, displaying an extreme form of masculinity. So doing things that are super masculine, like maybe lifting weights, you know, wearing certain messages, kind of tough guy messages on, you know, clothing, or using a great deal of profanity. So those are things. And thought I had, so this is what happens when you have too many pages open. Here. So Muscle and Fitness magazine, for instance, and, you know, particularly, you know, just this particular cover, and many of the covers look similar to this, but we can see that you know, this guy, he's all buffed out, and the image of what is enough muscle, for instance, has increased. It's become more extreme during the last 20 years. So it's there's a great deal of difference between what was viewed as being muscular in the 1950s, for instance, and then look at it in the 1980s, and then if we look at what it is today. So it's bigger, bigger, and we can see this even with the toys that are geared towards males. Those action figures, for instance, become bigger, larger, and I'm almost afraid to click on this, but it looks like it's a small image. I'm going to leave it small. But, you know, this is a man. It looks like he's holding weapons, and he's got two women kind of at his feet, almost like he's, you know, being worshipped. So that is kind of a masculinity. That's presented as a masculinity ideal in our culture, where the male is the dominant force, and he commands respect. And there's nothing wrong with wanting respect, but it's the way that males are taught that they should obtain respect. They're taught in American culture, they're taught to obtain respect through being very muscular, by being aggressive, sometimes by being violent, by And violent as in, hitting, punching, but also it's using your body to crowd someone else's space. Just physical presence, using a physical presence to dominate others is a form of hypermasculinity. Okay. So hopefully that kind of gives you a couple of ideas as to what I'm talking about and what Klein is talking about with masculinity imperatives and hypermasculinity. I'm going to jump down to, actually no, I'm not going to jump down. I am going to try to keep my promise and keep this at a short video. So I'm going to come back to you in a separate video to talk about our last three terms, which are normalized bullying, bully economy, and flamboyant heterosexuality. So please stay tuned for that.